Volkswagen's ID.5 electric coupe SUV is at its fastest in this GTX form. It's supposed to be sporty, and to an extent now is, in this improved form with its much torquier drivetrain. There's a much nicer cabin for this enhanced design too. Whether it's all enough to make this pricey ID.5 recommendable is another question.
At least for the time being, Volkswagen wants you to believe in GTX, its all-electric performance sub-brand. Back in 2021, this badging launched with faster GTX versions of the ID.4 and this car, the ID.5, an SUV-Coupe. Quite a lot's happened since, with GTX versions of the ID.3, ID.7 and ID.Buzz all launched before Volkswagen then surprisingly announced that eventually it would transition back to more familiar GTI and R branding for its coming performance EV models. But that's for the future. For right now, the GTX badge is supposed to remain aspirational for faster Volkswagen EVs and adorns significantly revised top ID.4 and, as in this case, ID.5 models that have gained a completely new and far torquier APP550 drive unit. This claims to supply the performance urgency that was missing in these supposedly fast and engaging variants from launch. The other thing customers didn't like in earlier ID.4 and ID.5s was the complex and fiddly infotainment system. Well, the 2024 update saw that completely revised too. Time then to give this ID.5 GTX a second look. There's quite a change with this updated ID.5 GTX compared to the powertrain originally offered in this model. The most significant difference is the introduction of Volkswagen's latest APP550 drive unit, which offers significantly more power, along with rather counterintuitively reduced energy consumption. Specifically, the ID.5 GTX, like the latest version of its ID.4 GTX showroom stablemate, now puts out 340 PS. That's 41 PS more than before, which means that the sprint to 62 miles an hour from rest now takes just 5.4 seconds, though the 112 mile an hour top speed remains the same. Yet at the same time, driving range from the same 77 kilowatt-hour usable capacity battery is now rated at 328 miles, which is around 20 miles more than before. All good. At the same time, Volkswagen has refined its Vehicle Dynamics Manager system for what it calls an even greater spread between comfort and dynamics. It's best to think of this like the conductor of an orchestra, coordinating the car's dual-motor, 4-motion all-wheel drive powertrain, plus its damping and stability systems. As previously, there's also an XDS differential for extra cornering traction. Also, as before, the GTX variant is the only ID.5 model which can be ordered with dynamic chassis control, adaptive damping as an option. Add that, and the result is a surprisingly keen convection, aided by near-perfect 50-50 weight distribution, which is just as well given the fact that this car has to overcome the drawbacks of its enormous 2.2-ton curb weight. Cornering is helped by 20-inch wheels with wide 235 section front and 255 section rear tyres. There are no significant exterior visual changes to this improved ID.5 GTX. As before, the coupe-like looks mean the car certainly has a dash more pavement presence than its ID.4 GTX SUV stablemate. And a more slippery 0.26 CD drag factor too, though that only fractionally boosts its driving range. As before, you might be a touch disappointed to find that very little has been done visually to set this GTX model apart from its humbler ID.5 range stablemates. But to a lesser or greater extent, aesthetic subtlety has always been one of the attractions of this sub-brand's GTI parent bloodline. It's cloaked here with a unique 20-inch wheel design, 21-inch rims are optional, plus there are 6 little point light LEDs in the lower front bumper. It's even harder to tell this GTX model apart from other ID.5s inside, though there's GTX branding on the seats, and if you're determined to set this version apart, you can specify a blue dashboard insert with red stitching. Otherwise, it's the usual ID.5 cabin setup, now improved thanks to a new bigger 12.9-inch infotainment central touchscreen with simpler menus, a more intuitive control structure and a more responsive IDA voice assistant. This offers fresh functions including cloud-based weather information and the status of sporting events or stock market prices. Volkswagen has, at last, illuminated the cabin temperature control sliders. Plus, the driving mode select has been moved to the steering column, and the optional augmented reality head-up display has been enhanced. You still have to put up with a very small 5.3-inch instrument display. At the back, as before, there's comfortable space for a couple of adults. It'd be a squash for three. You'd expect the effect of the tapering roofline to be a reduction in boot space, but actually the 549-litre capacity figure up to the level of the parcel shelf is 6 litres more than you get in an ID.4 GTX. The cargo area is extendable to 1,561 litres when you fold the two rear seats. ID.5 GTX pricing starts from around £55,000, that's for the standard model. You'll need around £1,800 more if you want the top style version, which has standard DCC or dynamic chassis control adaptive damping. There's a £1,500 premium over the slightly less sporty looking ID.4 GTX. To give you some range perspective, ID.5 pricing starts from just under £51,000. Equipment features in the entry-level ID.5 GTX run to 20-inch iStad alloy wheels, black roof rails, matrix LED headlights, LED rear tail lamps with dynamic turn signals, a panoramic glass roof, auto headlamps and wipers, front and rear parking sensors and keyless entry. Drive stuff includes sport suspension, an augmented reality head-up display, adaptive cruise control, selectable driving modes, an exterior sound actuator and more direct progressive steering. Inside, the seats have GTX branding and there's a leather-wrapped, heated, multi-function steering wheel with touch control. You also get an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, a heated climate windscreen, heated front seats, 3-zone air care climatronic air conditioning with controls for rear occupants, a rear-view camera and interior ambient lighting with 30 colour options. Infotainment's taken care of by a now larger 12.9-inch Discover Max navigation infotainment display with an upgraded Harman Kardon stereo system. Plus, there's a wireless smartphone charger, Car2X intelligent vehicle networking, and for semi-autonomous highway driving, Volkswagen's Travel Assist, Traffic Jam Assist and Emergency Assist system. Safety features include the usual autonomous braking, front assist setup, plus lane assist, dynamic road sign display, and a driver alert fatigue detection system. As we said in our driving section, driving range with this improved ID.5 GTX has increased significantly to as much as 328 miles thanks to the new APP 550 motor. The other significant change is an increase in charging speed to 175 kilowatts, which only applies to this GTX version. The base rear-driven Pro ID.5 variants still charge at just 135 kilowatts. To achieve the quoted range figure, you'll need to frequently use the provided Eco Drive mode setting, ideally in combination with the available B regenerative braking function, which slows the car significantly when you come off the accelerator. Whatever ID.5 model you select, your charging regime should be quite straightforward. There's a WeCharge app that helps you find and use over 150,000 public charge points. An AC1 phase 7.4 kilowatt garage wall box would replenish the 77 kilowatt hour battery from zero in about 12 hours. Out and about at a DC3 100 kilowatt charge point, it'll take no more than around 30 minutes to recharge your ID.5 with enough direct current to cover the next 137 miles. You should also make savings in BIK payments. There's the usual 2% EV rating, as well as exemption until 2025 from road tax and ULEZ or congestion charging. Volkswagen says that its aim is to make sure that the battery pack lasts as long as the car. And sure enough, the battery pack is warranted to have at least 70% of its usable capacity after 8 years or 100,000 miles. It's a pity that this updated ID.5 GTX couldn't have been the car that Volkswagen originally brought us. The infotainment cabin updates certainly make it easier to live with, and more pertinently for the GTX badging, the AEPP 550 drive unit's 75% torque increase makes it feel properly quick. This still, though, doesn't feel like a car with any sort of GTI bloodline. That doesn't mean you might not still want one, of course. If the current zeitgeist, or more likely your company fleet policy, has dictated to you that you have to have an EV, it has to be a hatch this size, and it needs to be properly sporty, there's quite a bit to like about the ID.5 GTX, especially in this form. Though we'd find it difficult to ignore the fact that much the same money would get you similar sportiness in a more premium feeling dual-motor Volvo EC40, or more power in an equivalent Tesla Model Y performance. Arguably, neither of these cars, though, nail the visual hot hatch vibe quite as well as the ID.5 GTX. In its dynamic aspirations, it's hobbled by the massive curb weight that is currently common amongst EVs, but it does feel usefully more engaging to drive than the standard model, which means that folk planning to spend big on an ordinary ID.5 should consider a GTX. Otherwise, though, we'd certainly counsel you to think carefully.